Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Gotta make sure we're recording. I don't want to
Stand for
write
the
minutes.
pledge. Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the republic for which it's nation, God, visible with all.
The reorganization, and I'll turn it over to Chelsea. I want to welcome our new members, Suzanne and Dawn. Get any questions as we go along, just interrupt. It's kind of keep it very open, get a lot of input from everybody on any topic that comes up, so feel free to speak up whenever. But also for the minutes, I'd like to thank Ed Scott and Ron Fleming for their couple years of service, so that we get that on the record that they did service for the last 2 years. Other is, I see we have Fort Myers Fire Department here. The agreement was we've talked to both the fire department and the sheriff about attending meetings to go through events of the last month and that. Appreciate you being here. We'll be talking about some stuff that's really relevant to you today. I do want to let you know that the sheriff's office did call. Dan Allers talked to him about a week and a half ago, and they called us. They are very interested in getting engaged, being a part of the research discovery we have to do, and then being a resource for us to talk about some of the best practices that they've got going around here. So he had a conflict for today. He was going to reschedule. I told him that not to bother because we had to do a lot of reorganization. And what the agreement is that we'll meet with him within 7 to 10 days after this meeting to go through this, and then we'll start formally bringing them in like the fire department does. They'll be here to answer our questions about activity for the last month. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chelsea, because the first thing we have to do is reorganize. We have to elect a chair and a vice chair, and then we'll get ourselves rolling again. So Chelsea, it's all yours.
The existing chair is Mr. John Goggin, and the vice chair is Mr. Tom Gressman. So at this point, we'll open it up for a motion as to the chair and the chair.
I'll make a motion. John Goggin is the chair.
Second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, John. All right, we'll entertain a motion for the vice chair.
Make a motion that Heidi be the vice.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, congratulations, Heidi. If you want to move to where Tom sits, typically how we sit is the chair is in the middle and the vice is to the,
Can do that now.
if you don't mind. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we go on to the next steps, and then I'll turn it over to John.
Heidi, grab your name.
Perfect. Before I turn it over to John to run the meeting, these mics are super sensitive. So just before you start talking, make sure it's green. That way we can fully record any comments that are made, and our transcriptionist can transcribe appropriately. And then I'll let John kind of turn it over with the roll call, and just we'll go around the room and identify yourself, as there are some new faces and voices that our transcriptionist will have to decipher. So, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the chair again. I mean that sincerely. So, Mike, we'll start with the roll call.
Mike
Give your name,
Charles.
and that way they'll be able to pick it up on the mics.
On the mic.
You green?
You have to push it?
Nope.
Mike Charles.
Bahan. Vaughn Thomas.
Ken Allers.
Nickel.
Heidi Youngworth.
John Goggin.
And Tom Gressman requested an excused absence due to a conflict with work. I am Chelsea O'Reilly, the Public Works Director, and I am your staff liaison for this committee.
All right, first is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Have a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Objections? people on the committee. All right, public comment? We have no public, so there'll be no comment. What I'd like to do before we get into what's ahead of us, last month I did the report that you have in your packet to the council that kind of summarized what we have been working on and the status of that. But I also made a request for a joint meeting with the council to have them prioritize what we're going to work on, but more importantly, how far they want us to work on different things. In the past, we've made recommendations, we've gone into great detail, and we've gotten no feedback. And unlike he said yesterday, he thought Lee was asking for accolades. I'm not asking for accolades, I'm asking for feedback. When we provide something to the council, that we get feedback on whether they accepted it, what they didn't accept, et cetera. And so in line with that, what I've asked Dan to do is kind of give us the view of the council on things like community policing, neighborhood watch, our involvement in the foot of the bridge, our involvement in the lighting study, and some of the ancillary stuff that we've done around crosswalk and shelter development in that. So Dan, if you could take 5 minutes and just kind of tell us what the council is looking from your perspective and in the meetings and from the discussion with your fellow council members, what is it that for us? Where do you really want us to focus this next several months?
Thanks, John. So in our discussions that we've had lately, we've talked a little bit about, the outreach center and what's going on there. We did bring up I brought up the nuisance abatement board issue about maybe potentially having you guys take a look at some of the data. That did not go over very well. They'd just as soon not have another committee be involved in that. However, we did speak about having you work with the fire department and working with Lee County Sheriff to take the numbers, analyze the numbers that are happening every month, and kind of put a plan together as what you're seeing, what kind of trends are out there. Councilmember Veach brought up a very good suggestion about having you guys working with the fire department again and the police department, the county sheriff's department, on coming up with ideas for community policing, looking at the enhanced services type things, neighborhood watches, best practices, maybe working with them, organizing some sort of community get together I know they want to do some training at the outreach center on things to look for. I know that some of the neighborhoods already have community watch things set up. So that's some of the things you're looking at. The base of the bridge, there's really been no discussion. It appears as though, I don't know if you saw the meeting yesterday, but Lee County came out and gave a pretty good information as to where that is and how that's moving forward. I really don't know how much you guys could have for input as far as what you've already done, the crosswalks. Sounds like the decision's already been made as to what plan is going to be going forward. What else is us? We're asking, what else did you ask about, John? I'm sorry. Besides the base of the bridge?
Lighting study.
I'll
Correct me if I'm
touch
wrong.
on that later.
Okay, Chelsea, we'll cover on that. I have personally gotten some emails about concerns that I've forwarded on to staff about some of the areas being too dim. The same issues that we seem to have been dealing with for quite a few years now. So Chelsea will touch on that and we'll be able to go forward with that. I've got some vision of hopefully getting back to, I know you guys had this discussions before I was elected, on doing something with some of the markings on for the sidewalks and for the bike lanes. Hopefully we could pick that back up. If I remember correctly, there was a company that was potentially willing to come in and do a demo or do something for free. Crosswalks, obviously, anything we can do to make those more visible, I think would be something that would be right up your alley. Anything that you guys feel, or if you have any suggestions, please let me know on public safety, and I'll be more than happy to bring it up in front of council to see what the will is of the council to have you spend time working on it or not working on it. The last thing I want is you guys to be working on something that nobody's going to listen to. So if you have any suggestions, please email me, call me, let me know. Serving on a committee, I know what it's like. Sometimes your ideas aren't always taken, it's just part of the thing. Sometimes things change and if budgetary reasons or whatever, but I don't want anybody to get down and think that personally, I can only speak for myself, that I'm not paying attention to what you're doing. I know how much time gets put into it, and I thank you for doing that.
So, first off, you said something about training with the outreach center?
Yeah, in my conversations with them, part of the stuff they would like to do there is bring people in and train them, not necessarily train them, but, you know, advise them on what to look for as far as see something, say something, give you some ideas of some of the things that you could look for potentially that are out of line. They, as you said, they were planning on being here today, but there was a conflict, so they will be back. The fire department is, they've committed to coming in every month and giving you updates that you guys can look at the data, put together a report, present it to council, and keep an eye on things that way.
Does anybody have any questions for Dan? Before we move on to the rest of this thing? So, I want to start with community policing, the neighborhood watch. That seemed to be the hotter topic for the council this time around. I'll just give you my views, and then I want you to push back on it. One thing that, in watching the council, and as it went through when they were developing the noise abatement board, or the nuisance abatement board, was a whole lot of analysis, I'll call it, on what the problems were on the island, what the sheriff did or didn't do, what kind of calls there were, where the calls were, what type of calls. We got this report that Chelsea gave us. They gave us a number of calls, but none of us tells us really unbiased opinion on what the calls were, what they involved, and how they were resolved, and where they are. You know, we hear they're all at Lonnie Kai. Well, no, they're not at Lonnie Kai. They're on the street in front of Lonnie Kai. You know, we talked about, the council's talked about neighborhood watch. The council's talked about adding community policing services. And the thing in my mind that's missing is we don't know exactly what problems community policing would resolve. We don't know where the problems are for neighborhood watch. And are the problems things that a neighborhood watch would actually help with? Are the problems that exist on the island problems that should be covered under our current contract with the fire department and with the police? Or do we need to get a new contract for community policing? And will it actually address the problem? The other issue that I have with this is, until we know what the problem are and we can quantify those in some way, how do we know that what we're paying for is actually solving the problems that people perceive that we have, real or perceived that we have? So one of the things that I think we need to do up front is get those reports in a more detailed level from fire and from the sheriff, and then have a subset of this group actually meet with the fire department and go through them, and they can explain what they are. You know, when I see, you know, what is it called here, area checks, are those area checks things that they do automatically? Are they things that some neighborhood, is there a concentration, one neighborhood always wants these area checks, which may be a great opportunity for a neighborhood watch, other ones may not have it. So the fire's already, you know, Matt and the fire department have already agreed that they would sit with us and do that. This was an idea that Jim had way back in January or December of last year, and then COVID hit, so we didn't get it kicked off. Conversation I had with the sheriff, they too will sit with us and go through each of these calls. And then with those, we find out what the problem was, we kind of categorize those, and then we look at where the problem exists. Is it island-wide? Is it downtown? Is there specific neighborhoods or condos that are the problems that we need to be addressed versus, you know, blanket, we're just going to buy this service and put it everywhere. The other thing with that is once we have that information, I think we also need to look at, and I know Chelsea supplied us with the ordinances that we have with the sheriff. They don't tell us what we're paying for. We pay the sheriff a good deal of money, and they provide X number of officers and services on the island. But I don't think anybody here knows exactly what those services are. Could any of those services be translated into community, some of the problems that we're calling community policing? We need community policing because people are driving golf carts up and down the sidewalk and running people off. Yesterday, there was a moped running up and down the sidewalk, and it's not even season yet, so I can't imagine what it's gonna look like in season when they start running the mopeds up and down to get out of traffic. So that may be a place where we do community policing. But with that, do we need to get the full two officers for a year? Or do we have opportunities by categorizing the problems and saying, look, motorized vehicles on the sidewalk are a problem. Maybe the solution is we do blitzes. So once a month, we actually hire them to come in and issue tickets, work with a PIO and say, this month, on this date, we're gonna be doing this. And anybody that's out there still riding their golf cart or their electric bikes on there, that was their warning, and we give them tickets. We don't just say, well, so what? But those are the type of things I think we need to look at instead of just a blanket, let's just go and buy community policing. I think we need to, first we find out what the problem is, categorize the problem, look at the services that fire and police are already contracted to do, and then determine if a neighborhood watch or investing in community policing is the right way to move forward. That's my thoughts, and I'll go around and everybody can put in. Mike, thoughts?
No, I'm good with it. I think Jim would be a good contact for going over this stuff because he was in the police background. So I think Jim would be the good liaison.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
My concern is that if we have the community watch groups and, what was the other thing that you mentioned?
Community policing and neighborhood watch.
Community-
One is a contracted service with Lee County.
Right.
Not cheap. And the other would be organizing, this group helping organize neighborhood watches in various areas around the island.
Just, I thought initially on the whole thing is the neighborhood watch and community. And would they be taken as seriously, sheriff's department?
Community policing would actually be sheriff officers. We would contract for, they would be able to write tickets to the other and everything else. Neighborhood watch, as I understand it, and this is what we'll find out as the group goes through and does the research, neighborhood watch is more making people in the neighborhood aware of what to look for. Is there a strange vehicle in the neighborhood? Is there a gang of youths that are starting to dive off of their community dock into the water? And what it would be is helping educate them on what to look for and then how to report that activity to the sheriff or code enforcement, whatever the case may be, so that they would actually take the action. The community watch people wouldn't be the ones that issue any tickets. They wouldn't be doing any enforcing. That's my understanding of community watch, neighborhood watch.
I completely agree with you. Actually, when I read this, I thought there isn't enough data for us to really understand what this is telling us. Is a sexual assault happening twice, one here, one here. The nuisance abatement board, we were all talking about that passed. Who knows how long that will take to get filled? And I know that the chairman has to be an attorney that practices court law, or they have some guidelines that they must follow. And I do think it would be a great idea for this group to get all the data, exactly like you said, look at everything, really establish where everything is. And Community Watch, we actually have one in our neighborhood. Again, it's something that the sheriff's station here would offer, and all it was the sheriff's department came in and they talked to our entire neighborhood. They said, these are the kind of things that you look for in your neighborhood. If you have a problem, here's the number you call if it's not an emergency, a 911. And we started a email chain just for everybody in the neighborhood. If something is wrong, hey, did you notice this? Hey, I was robbed. Hey, someone was in my backyard last night. Did you see anything on your ring, on your doorbell or whatever it is? So it's another good way for us to, the residents proactive, give them the tools that they need without, again, paying for policing around. But I loved everything you said, because that was what I was going to bring up, is to get more data so that we can be educated and wise in our decisions or comments.
Thanks, John. I agree with you that the information that was provided by the sheriff's office really doesn't help us much because there's nothing there to understand. It's just raw data. And I think we're gonna, in order for us to be effective at having a handle on what's going on the island, we have to understand what these numbers mean. So we're gonna need more information from them. Judgment. As it relates to community policing, I can't speak to how the sheriff's department is organized and how they perform these functions. I was a little surprised when I saw that they would offer community policing at a price. Where, in my experience, community policing is generally a philosophy of an agency. So I guess I gleaned from that they're saying the officers that are currently assigned here are designed strictly for patrol, safety, and security, and enforcement, and responding to calls. That they have no time left over in their day to perform any community policing function as part of their beat. Now, what is community policing? Community policing, in my experience again, is officers taking the time to get to know their neighborhoods, get to know the people that live there, to understand what some of the neighborhood issues are. If there are people that are causing problems in a neighborhood in a more routine fashion, the officers get to know that. I think our patrol officers that I've spoken with, they know a lot about what's going on this island, and they would be in a position to really help us a lot with community policing. What I'm hearing the sheriff say is, well, they don't really have the time to do that, and that's not their job. There may be more involved in community policing as the sheriff's department does it than what I have experienced in my past. But I would be curious to see what it is. They would be the ones, for example, that program you're talking about in your neighborhood. Fantastic. That's exactly the way Neighborhood Watch should work. Generally, it's set up with the assistance of the local law enforcement agency. And the local law enforcement agency might come to, you would generally have meetings once a month or once every 2 months or 3 months, however, whatever the community wanted to get together. And that the police department community officer, could be the beat officer or the officer assigned to community relations in that area, would come to the meeting and would talk to you about the problems that you're experiencing or not experiencing in your neighborhood, and could offer you also some suggestions for probably public safety in terms of keeping your neighborhood. Each neighborhood we have a lot of unique neighborhoods on this island, and each one has its own characteristics. And so I think there's a lot of advantages to doing community policing. I think it's also a buzzword that's going around the country right now. We're seeing a lot of us against them kind of relationship and feeling between law enforcement and the community. The concept of community policing is to breach that, so that the police don't come in as an occupation force whose job it is to, essentially enforce the law, arrest people, and the community essentially on edge, possibly because of their enforcement activities. It's really designed to breach that, where the community and the law enforcement agency that are working there become partners, feel comfortable with one another and know each other. Maybe the sheriff's trying to say, you're going to need 2 more officers down there in order to have the time for that to happen. If their concept is the guys doing patrol and answering calls have nothing to do with community policing, I'd be glad to discuss how that doesn't work with the sheriff, because I think the people that are doing the patrol and answering the calls, they need to be part of the community that they're working in. They need to be part of the community policing approach and concept. That's just my view on it, and I think we're not going to be able to make any kind of a recommendation one way or the other without more information, without more interaction with Lee County Sheriff as to their ideas are, how this works in their particular agency. Every agency approaches this a little differently. We're not going to know until we actually have the opportunity to do that. So I think that your ideas there, John, are important to get, able to get together with them and talk about it. Madam Vice Chair.
I think everybody has covered it. Yes, we definitely need to find out where the problems are, what the numbers mean. I think about it.
Okay, so, one other thing that came up at council, if I heard the meeting properly, is that council's looking for these numbers as well. And so it's a question of who gets the reports and how we coordinate all that. I personally don't want a lot of filters. I would like to see a subgroup here. I agree with Mike that Jim has a background that can help interpret this, and maybe one other person, so think about this, because at the end of the meeting, we'll pick someone else. But I did relay to the sheriff up at the outreach that we would get back to him within a week or so, and we'd set up a meeting with the intent of them providing reports to us that we can then discuss with them, not just give us a report and we try to interpret. We would actually sit down with them, and we do the same in the past. Matt has offered us to sit with you and go through, so we have an understanding of what they are, and then we can kind of map out where they are on the island, and that would be the beginning of the discovery. And so I guess the question is going to go to Dan or Chelsea here, but are you okay with us doing the direct outreach to the sheriff and the fire department to start going through these? We would summarize what we have, we would report that back, and to Jim's original idea, we were intending to have these meetings with the fire and sheriff coming to our meetings to do once a month a review of their calls and then provide that report to the council. It's an unbiased report that we'd be giving, and so it's still our intent that we would do the direct outreach to the sheriff and the fire. Do you see any problem with that?
I personally don't see any problem with it, and it sounded in the meeting that they were okay with you guys working directly with the sheriff's office and the fire department. I'll let Chelsea speak as to how the information would get from you to us then.
I can tell you that the information that was provided to you today was through our town manager, and he's had direct contact with both Chief Love and Sheriff's Office, and so he's kind of been the point person staff-wise handling that, and it's a simple pass-through of information. And from what I heard at the council meeting, the direction at least that I understood was that it would continue that way through the town manager. But that's something, this committee, one thing you did mention, sunshine law is that you guys pick one person, because you guys cannot have two people meeting outside of this committee. So if it's Nicole, if it's yourself, if it's Heidi, if it's one of the new members, whomever it may be, it's one singular person doing that coordination effort, and then they bring that report back to this committee. You were mentioning like a sub of this committee.
To get information, not to make any decisions.
I know, but any two outside has to be a public meeting. So I make the recommendation that it's a singular person reaching out to, maybe if it's yourself to the fire department and another person to the sheriff's office, and bring it back to this committee, not a joint effort. Makes sense. Just don't want any sunshine violated. And I just have one other side comment, which I think maybe over a year ago, that this kind of all transpired in these comments and questions about numbers. Also, take into the fact of like lighting. If there are crashes or incidents, maybe we need to look at the lighting of that area. Or there are more than just community responses in that sense. There's stuff that staff-wise that we can look to address, or maybe it's a trolley stop issue, things like that. I don't want our focus to only be, I tend to look at the big picture and how we can enhance all of our services, so.
Okay, so just want to, I know what you're saying about two people meeting, but, okay.
Why can't we just notice the meeting? I think it'd be much more effective to have at
Yeah, we
least
need
two
more than
members.
one.
That's just my opinion.
I would be willing to help Jim on that.
I would,
First off, everybody will get, so the first thing I want to do is request from Roger 6 months' worth of detailed reports, not the summary, but the actual reports that they have, and get that distributed to the committee. Maybe I'll have to talk to Heron or something about the best way to go about having a couple people meet with the sheriff. Jim can meet with the sheriff, he can't meet with the fire. Because
Correct.
so for those that don't know, Jim is also a fire commissioner. And so we're going to need someone to meet with the fire, others to meet with the sheriff. And this is where this is where I'm concerned about only one. I want to be able to coordinate that, and that's what I see kind of as my role, to make sure that they're being done in similar ways, so that when we get the data, we're looking at similar analysis of it, so we're making decisions that are across both first responders.
How about, let's do this. How about somebody here outlines exactly what the intent is. And if it's X person going to the fire, Y person going to the sheriff, and then whatever the process is, send that to me in an email, and I can run that through the clerk's office and the town manager and / town attorney, and just make sure that
All right, so here's what I'll do. What I'm hearing is everybody agrees we need to do the data analysis. So let me write up how I think this would work. I will send it to you. You will send it to the members. They will put their input. Based on their input, we'll write a final process that everybody's agreed to. That's what you'll get to Amy, to Roger, to John, whoever needs to see it. And then with requests that they come up with a way for us to have more than one person in those dialogues. Eventually, the meetings would be here, because eventually, just like today, they'll come, we'll have the report. If we have a question from the report, they'll just answer it to the general group here. But for the discovery, I don't think 7 people can sit in there and be asking questions. We'll never get through the process. But if I outline it and what we want to look at, we want to analyze it, what results we want to come out of that with, and I'll get that to you. We'll send it to the group. You all comment on it and email back to Chelsea.
Only
to Chelsea.
to me, only email to me.
And then what she does is she summarizes that. She and I get together, we do a final one, and then that gets distributed back to the membership, but it also goes out to the clerk, the town manager, and the attorney.
Do you want us to wait to say, like, I can either help there or I can do that, wait till all that's done? Got it.
Yeah, because
Till we see what we
this
can
is
do.
only the first topic, and we've got a bunch of things we're going to be working on. And this was part of what Chelsea and I talked about, is trying to get 1 or 2 leads in each area so that there's a focal point to keep the one process driving while the other ones are going around it.
And mind you, you are not limited to 1 meeting per month. I'm setting myself up here because I have to notice on all your information and coordinate it with the chambers and stuff, but you are not set to just 1 meeting. You all can have a work session, you can do a roundtable discussion, you can have this dais. This is your meeting. I am simply here to assist you and make sure that staff-wise you have what you need.
Some of the things I'm looking at, just so we know, is I want to get the detailed reports, but I also want the contracts, not the ordinance that did it, but I want to see what services we're actually paying for and how much we're paying, so we can map those to the problems and the problems that they're addressing or not addressing. This goes to availability for whoever community policing is defined. I remember the number was it wasn't cheap to do community policing, and I believe they also said you have to get both officers or they won't do it.
Yeah, roughly it was around 100, and maybe having them come in and do the presentation for you, they didn't get a chance to really go into depth. It was kind of cut pretty short as to what exactly it is, what it does, and how it's helped Anita, for instance. But roughly it's about $150,000 per officer.
The other thing with the data, and that's data, the other is, and I'm going to call more anecdotal, and the town has the capability of doing a survey. I'd like your thoughts on, once we have the data of what's actually happening from fire and sheriff, is surveying the public as to what they perceive to be safety issues on the island. We know what's documented as problems that they responded to, but I also think there's perception issues always in any community. And I'd like to have you start thinking about, I think it's 10 questions or something like that we can put in a survey. The town can actually do a survey for us and ask the community, you know, and maybe we get a responses might show problems in certain areas that are perception problems. It may be areas, you mentioned homeless, that it may be an issue. I never see it mid-island. It's very apparent when you come downtown. And so those are things that different areas of the island, it'll do a couple things for us. One, it'll be areas we need to look at, maybe for community neighborhood watch, maybe community policing. But I also think it helps us in starting to open up communications with the general public and using the PIO to say that, you know, we did this survey and what we do have is a problem with, let's just, I'll pick on the homeless for a minute here. The home, because the county's actually meeting on that, I believe, as we speak here. But 1:30, you know, homeless is becoming a problem. And so, or it is a problem. And by being able to take results from a survey, we may be able to inform other residents that don't live in that area that these are things to watch for. And when you see this happening, this is what you should do. Kind of a island-wide neighborhood watch against a particular problem that may not get documented as well in a police or a fire report. So think about it, put it in the back burner, because I don't want to do it until we get some data from the fire and sheriff. But I think getting a survey out to ask the general public what their perception of safety issues is would be helpful both for the PIO and for helping us in determining whether community policing or neighborhood watch might be a solution to resolve some of those problems.
If I may, just before we go on, John, Chelsea, can we work with Roger too, just to see how much involvement he wants to have with those reports? If he wants to get them and then send them, or if he just wants to be copied on it so he can see what's going back and forth? Busy guy, I just want to see if he wants to be the one that's facilitating it, or if he just wants to be included to see what's going back and forth.
And I'll clarify that for your next follow-up meeting.
And this goes back to the question I asked earlier, Dan. If things we get are filtered, or if work we do is going to be filtered in some way, then why are we doing it? And so I have no problem with coordination through Roger. He's got the contact. He meets with the sheriff regularly. He knows what's available, what contracts they have. Providing that to us is great. If, on the other hand, decisions are made as to what we get, what we don't get, what we see, what we don't see, what access we have to the sheriff we don't have, then, and I'm speaking only for myself, that does become a problem, because at that point, we're really not doing an unbiased analysis of what's going on.
And John, I know that there's been mention, once all of the committees reorganize, there is a plan for the chairs of each committee to sit down with the council. And that'll really, I think, help with an open table discussion and dialogue and direction from council at that meeting. Because I know, like this committee, other committees are kind of trying to figure out what the direction is and what tasks they need to prioritize. So I know that I believe they're trying to schedule that before the holidays, but all of the committees, like I said, have to reorganize first.
Anything else on the community policing, neighborhood watch, and the idea of discovery that somebody wants to have? So the next step is for me to put together a plan, get it to Chelsea, she gets it to you, everybody puts their input, and then we take that plan, get it back so everybody knows what's going on, and depending on the outcome from the town staff, we'll set up the meeting with the sheriff. I would like to, I'll get this written up in the next day or two, so when you get it, you'll get an email. Please respond right away so we can get this started. The sheriff is anxious to go. Fire's been here ever since we came up with the idea. I know they're very supportive, and I think it will be, maybe we just hold a meeting and everybody comes and asks questions of that. I'd like to see, before that, I'd like to actually see what some of these reports look like, so that we have an idea how well organized we could have those conversations, as opposed to really breaking it down.
I can tell you also too, John, I don't want to speak for the fire department or the sheriff's department, but in my conversations with them, this reporting that you guys have been discussing, they're looking forward to that data as well, because that will help them see what trends are, be able to staff, be able to understand what months certain things happen. because they may not always have the time to do that the analytics. So they're looking forward to doing seeing the reports of exactly what you're talking about.
On the other hand, it's a little disturbing that they don't know the trends and don't have.
Oh, I'm sure they do, but I think the depth in which you're talking about going into is probably further than what they may or may not. And again, I don't want to speak for them. I don't know what their policies are, but.
Okay, so next steps, that's the process, is I'll write it up, you guys respond to get Chelsea, and then from there, we'll start getting the meeting set up to do this discovery. From there, and Chelsea's right, and this was, you'll see in the report, the original intent, we weren't looking at community policing and neighborhood watch as part of the safety committee. When Jim brought this up, we were actually looking at problem areas where lighting would have come into play, where shelters. At the time we were designing the shelters and whether we were going to have emergency contact communication capabilities at these shelters, what kind of lighting there was going to be, the first aid, the CPR devices at these shelters. We were looking at those kind of incidents. Now it's been expanded because the council's looking at community policing and neighborhood watch. We're going to expand that, what the research will be applied to. One other thing before I forget, Chelsea, can you get for Suzanne and Dawn the original pedestrian bicycle?
I will send you the PED master plan as a link. It is a very large document, so don't print it at home. It's like a couple hundred pages. But if you do want a hard copy of it, I'd be more than happy to print it. Just send me an email reply and let me know. But I'll send you the link so you can access it online.
I do have a copy of that, so if anybody wants to see it, I have it in a binder if you just want to see it on paper versus welcome to look at it.
I'd recommend that you get a copy. When the Public Safety Committee came back together again after a little hiatus or a pause, lighting study was a big part of that, but the primary task we were charged with by council was to implement this pedestrian bicycle master plan, and it's an inch-thick document that goes through how you design crosswalks, lighting, and it's got all the things in there. Most of those have passed because the road done. We tried to do some retrofitting. The road is done, so just keep that in mind. But it's a good background on where things started and some of the ancillary stuff that we still have out there. Next up was the lighting study. Chelsea, did they get their bids back, and how many, and what's the status?
Oh yeah, we got the whole goose egg bids back. None. So we put it out to bid for 6 weeks, and we had some questions come in during the bid process, but ultimately we had no responses. So it has since been published again as of I believe either last Friday or today. Actually, I believe it's today, and put it back on the street. So that is an active bid, so I'm under the cone of silence, but once that comes in, hopefully we'll get some responses, but once that comes in, hopefully we'll get at least one, if not.
Oh, even under the cone of silence, we know why no one bid, and did we change anything in the bid to actually try and get some this time?
So I can tell you in the previous bid, we did reach out to so we normally get like a lot of questions from like advertising, like magazines and things like that, just general questions. But we did have one firm that inquired and had asked some detailed questions, and we did reach out to them and ask why, they didn't put a bid in, and they said because they didn't find it until at the last minute, so they ran out of time to submit. So it was advertised in the paper, and it is on our town website and in Demand Star, so it is out on the street right now for his second time.
And when's the response date?
For my birthday week, the first week of December, I believe. Don't quote me on that. You'll have to look on the town website.
Talking about whole lighting on the island?
Yes.
Haven't we done multiple studies on that?
I don't get it.
That's what I was going to ask. What's the scope of this bid?
It's a design bid build. So bringing a consultant on board to provide options for lighting, and then doing presentation, doing a photometric analysis, then taking that to council. There.
Was there yeah, John? Yes. Any involvement anticipated by this committee in interacting with that company once it's selected in its design process, or are we done now?
As of right now, it's out to bid. Hopefully, we'll get a responsive bidder, but, I mean, once it's on the street for 30 days, it has to go through the process, it has to be awarded, then you negotiate a contract, and then you set forth the scope, which could include coming to this committee, which you guys have discussed in the past, and then presenting to town council. It's a lengthy process, but that determination would be determined when the scope is being drafted.
Well,
At this point, I don't anticipate until
I
New
guess,
Year.
I guess I'd ask it more directly. Will a member of this committee or members of this committee be part of the evaluation team? We did see the original when it went out. We provided some feedback. We never heard back on whether that feedback was accepted. Was it in the bid? Was it not in the bid? That's my issue with feedback. But I want to build on what Jim is saying. When these bids come back, will this committee, a member of, or multiple members of this, be part of the evaluation team to determine which vendor to start negotiations with?
Okay.
That's a question that goes
Okay.
to you or to Roger.
So the first question you posed was the feedback provided from this committee included in the RFP or RFQ? Yes. Same as MRF. MRF provided comments for the package. Secondly, the town manager decides who is on the evaluation committee. I don't know that he has put that out yet. Has assigned those roles. So that's something, again, I can follow up and find out and get back to you. I'm sure Murph is itching just like you all are to have a member of their committee on the evaluation. So again, it would be one person. That's something you guys can think about. If someone from this committee was selected, who it would be. And that's something where we can have in our back pocket prepared and ready if the town manager does choose to have somebody from this committee on evaluation.
Has Florida Power and Light been contacted on this? As far as putting lights on their poles? Because, I mean, I only worked for them for 44 years, and I never, ever hung foreign lights on our poles. I'm assuming that if they're gonna put their lights up, it's gonna be on their poles. That's gonna be an ugly mess on this island. Setting more poles.
I was just gonna say, if we nominate somebody, I think it should be Mike.
I'm just saying, I'd never seen that before anywhere. I mean, we've gone into a subdivision, hooked up what we call foreign lights. I mean, in a whole subdivision. But I've never seen another company out there putting lights on our poles.
So part of bringing this consultant on board would be evaluating FPL's options and private options. And then coming up with a recommendation as to what is the best.
And once you put those lights in, I mean, if you get Florida Power and Light to put them in, they maintain the lights. They're not gonna maintain a foreign light. Just aren't gonna do it. Not gonna, that is gonna be such a cost, to be astronomical cost for a company to come in and maintain lights.
I guess that goes to the question part of the question I was trying to ask before is, once this consultant is on board and is in the process of determining what direction it's going to recommend the town go, is this committee going to be involved in working with that consultant as that decision developed to be ultimately presented to town council?
I'll come back to you. Get an answer from the town manager and I'll come back to you.
This is really huge. I mean, it's a heavy cost to this city. I mean, I don't see why we aren't sitting here dealing with FPL. I mean, they have coastal properties all over the Florida. So, I mean, you know, and it's something that they could use this city, try to, you know, make it right with the turtles and the people, and then take that and use it in other areas of the state. So, I mean, they're an environmentally sensitive company, so it probably would be very advantageous for them to be heavily involved in it. I mean, they got a lot of lights. I mean, they can get lights, whatever we need.
Well, it sounds to me the consultant that we're going to hire going to have to determine the direction that he thinks, based on his research, best for the town to go. For experience, there's a lot of common sense in what you
Yeah,
say,
it's just,
Mike, and
I've never
that's,
seen it, and I've never seen another company.
that's what, I
hanging-
guess that's why I'm hoping this committee would be in a position to have some input into those decisions, because these are the citizens of this town. That's what we're here for. We're a citizen advisory committee. And so I think the idea of having citizens involved in the decision-making process is an outstanding way for a community to operate. I'm hoping that we'll be allowed to be involved so that we can make some common sense recommendations. Because we already know from our past experience here, there's a couple of ways to go. You can spend about $8 million, or you can spend a whole lot less than that and get the same, essentially the same result.
I'll come back to you.
One is a private system and one is a public system. So,
Things. One, there's the evaluation that sets up what that contract is for and what the metrics are, et cetera. And then the other is participation in that. Suzanne, I noticed you look like Kevin. We've done this already. Yes, we've done this several times.
Multiple times.
The first one was a study commissioned by the county, and they hired a firm. He came in, they did a fine report about lighting and having equal lighting, and it talked about all this, the whole island and how we'd have this steady, constant light, and it would avoid night blindness and light blindness and all this. But when it was, they proposed it to, first to the committee. He listened. He said it was fully compliant with turtles and turtle compliance. And then it got to the council, and the individuals from I think Eve came up and started talking about the turtles. And that set the council off, the previous council off on, we didn't protect the turtles, white lights, you can't do this. And the council at that point really stopped asking questions of Dave and moved on to turtles, and this didn't work for turtles. And they kind of discounted the rest of the data that was in there. Subsequent to that, they want another study, because not every council member believes FPL is as benevolent as Mike thinks they are. And they don't trust FPL, so they want another study. We hired another firm. Turned out that guy didn't have a great track record. Matter of fact, I believe he'd been arrested, and so they stopped that one. And then they issued another one. We didn't get any bids. Now we're going to try one more time. The issue really becomes, what's the best lighting configuration to fly with turtles, to give pedestrians the greatest safety, and then also in there, one thing that we got when we were working over these things for the last year and a half or more, is that the lighting, the street lighting and the crosswalk lighting has to have a symmetry between them because of the light blindness that you can be caused by a street light being misplaced with a crosswalk. So we talked about everything from lights in this roadway to lights overhanging every crosswalk to lights on either end of the crosswalk to amber lights that don't have the same pedestrian safety as it does for the turtles, and it becomes a very emotional issue on the island. The objective of the purpose of getting a third party to come in again was an independent third party that would provide facts and data so that a unemotional assessment could be made. The cost of the original study, I think it was going to cost us a few $1 million. It was like X number of light posts, and we would have had lighting up and down the island. Another option that came in when they started talking about amber lighting was what, $8 million, $10 million? Yeah. Well, that's $10 million. That's a lot. And then we talked about the town doing it and maintenance, and Chelsea could be out there changing light bulbs for the rest of her life if the town took it over. But all these things they come to the meetings and they just get rolled into the emotion. And so the idea of this contract is to get an independent assessment by lighting professionals to say, here are the alternatives, here's the cost, here's the level of safety for pedestrians, here's compliance with turtles, what's the best lighting configuration, and from there, the council would make an informed decision. That's the purpose behind this fourth attempt at a study. That's kind of the background. But on that, yes, we would like very strongly to be part of the evaluation team so we get the right criteria they're looking at, and then also being able to comment on the report, you know, the input into the report itself.
Let me, or if you want to, you guys can look at the RFQ that's out there, but I believe we put in there some MRF and public safety would be involved, but I'll have to double check and come back to you guys, let you know.
Anything else on lighting? Well, then, good, we'll get to a good one. For the bridge design. You heard that. So you wanted something easier? Background for the new members. We were given last October a request to look at the design for the foot of the bridge. It came in with, I believe, 12 crosswalks in that corner. We looked at it, we talked about it, we talked about the landscape that still apparently is going to be there and what kind of landscape they'll use in that little median. We came up with a solution that said 0 crosswalks at the foot of the bridge. We proposed that recommendation to the council, previous council. We didn't go to the meeting when they met with the county. They came back with 12 or 8, I forgot which it is now, but still a large number. That was in December, January, February. And just before the COVID kind of shut down the meetings, they presented it again with that large number of crosswalks. And I talked to, I can't remember the guy's name. Who's the day-to-day manager for the county here?
Rob Phelan?
Rob. I met with Rob right after that meeting, and he agreed to come and talk to this committee and explain why there was 8 to 12 crosswalks. He said, well, it's standard engineering, and we're saying we're not standard. We're not a standard island at all. Our seasonal fluctuation on traffic, pedestrians, we'd like to have some answers. If not to be able to make our case, at least to be able to inform the public when they start complaining about people running back and forth across there every day and tying up traffic. It's opposed to using Crescent and Old San Carlos traffic lights. Right after we agreed to do that, the meeting shut down for several months. I know yesterday the county came and they presented something that no individual could possibly have read if they were home unless they had a full wall screen that they could blow up to see what was there. First off, I'd like to, if you could get the presentation of what the current one is to every member. And I'd also like to know if we can, again, if they're, I know they're gonna have a public hearing in January or February, but before that, I'd really like to know why they rejected 0 and went to 12. Is there nothing between 0 and 12? What we looked at is, if you look at, for example, going around the bend, up there where the old Ocean Jewel used to be, there was a reason there was a sidewalk. There was retail businesses there. There is no retail business there. There is no reason for anybody to walk past Crescent. Why would you put crosswalks to allow people to walk into basically a vacant lot or a lot that's undecided? I mean, off the bridge to walk straight across, we talked about putting barriers in there to make them go mid-block before they had to cross. And so I still would like to know, one, can we have that meeting with Rob and the engineers to make our case or listen to their reasons so that we can explain it to people? Or two, is what we say not going to matter because FDOT and the county have decided with the town that this is what we've accepted and we're going to move forward. Clear? Quest?
I can tell you that the previous council endorsed the plan and submitted that to the county, and so that the county and FDOT are clear on moving forward. I can kindly request the reasoning, but there's no guarantee I'll get it. But I understand.
This is where the feedback comes in. I mean, that was months ago. From 0 to 12, I can't believe there's no compromise between 0 and 12. There is no options between 0 and 12. And if there is, based on engineering requests, we have no idea if the 0 was even proposed to these people. And so I think that's what Les was trying to bring up yesterday is the committees make recommendations. And they are recommendations. We understand that that's all they are. And the town staff is gonna do what's best in their mind for budget and everything else. The feedback mechanism to say why 0 was rejected or never proposed, that to me, and I'm speaking only for myself at the moment, that's very important so that we know as we're making recommendations going forward, how extreme they should be or how compliant they should be with existing practices. We didn't get that feedback.
If I recollect that this committee's redesign and comments, and then there were 3 plans that were taken to the council at the time for the base of the bridge. And town council at the time opted to go with the existing plan that you saw yesterday and endorse that to FDOT and the county. So as regards to feedback, I'll do my best to get what I can from those that made the decisions.
I could be wrong, but I thought we were given the 3 plans and didn't we design our own plan?
Did a
And
hybrid.
present that, I'm pretty sure I still have the map. We designed what we thought and we presented that to the council, but if I remember correctly, our plan went this and the other 3 stayed here. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the way I remember it.
Our objective, at least as I understood it, was why are we redesigning the base of the bridge? Isn't it great the way it is? Well, no, one of the number 1 complaints, and if you do a survey like we're talking about, number 1 complaint is going to be traffic getting on and off the island. When traffic is backed up, 14 blocks or more miles, get off at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it coming on for the same reason, all the way back to Summerlin. They're saying, can't we somehow improve the situation for traffic on and off the island? But that was kind of what was in, I think, the committee's mind. What's causing a lot of this problem? Pedestrians in the street. That's what was causing a lot of the problem. So we were trying to figure out how can we attack the pedestrian in the street problem and facilitate the flow of traffic and maintain safety for all. And that's how we ended up coming up with the hybrid plan. And nobody asked us, why would you come up with such a crazy plan? It just seemed to go away.
But this is state right-of-way.
Yes.
They have the final decision on what's done. They can ask our input, they can ask the county's input. I know part of this whole redesign of the base of the bridge requires town property or, property and county property. So there are stakes in it, the town being one of the stakeholders, but in the end, it is state right-of-way and they make the final say. But I can backtrack and try to figure out why or how we got to where we are. I can talk to the town manager. He can potentially reach out to the county and the state to find the justification as to the sort of crosswalks and how they got to the conclusion that they did.
I don't mean to sound ignorant, but I would think the easiest thing to take out is a crosswalk. I mean, you're not switching if it's a roundabout, I think that's what it was, like an oval about. I think that was the last one. To take out a crosswalk is really to take out, change a little curbing and get rid of the paint in the middle or a light. That's where I think that I get that it's the state's final decision, but I'm not asking them to take it and redo this whole thing. It's just, we don't want you to cross here, we don't want to cross here, and I think they need to visit that. And then I don't know if the current town council, I know the past town council looked at it. I think it's something to bring up with everyone because you hit the nail on the head. The whole point is to keep cars in and out. And just yesterday, there's no people here and people are running across the street left and right and cars are slamming their brakes on. And I was thinking about this hit and run on here. Where does that all happen at? I'm guaranteeing it's on the north end because someone's run out and got smacked. So throwing that my 2 cents.
I hear you all. Let me do some reconciling and figuring out what I can get, and try to bring it back to your next committee.
because I agree completely, Dawn, is that infrastructure we're not changing except for, and the other side of that is, just to play this out, it's more than just being a jerk about not getting the feedback. It's, if this is the reason that they did it this way, is there some kind of education, some kind of signage, something else that we can do to inform pedestrians to stay out of or to navigate pedestrians the right way? The design that we did come up with moved them to Crescent Street light and to Old San Carlos light, which we've been told many times, a traffic light controls pedestrians more than a voice officer deciding randomly when to let them cross or not, or giving them sidewalks to cross to when there is no reason to cross at that particular point. Dan, were you going to say something?
No, I think you guys pretty much covered it. I saw the meeting yesterday. You'd already touched on, they were gonna talk about it in February and March. As Chelsea had said, there's 3 entities that had to agree on it, and my understanding is that those 3 entities agreed on it and it's moving forward. That's not to say that they can't look at crosswalks, but it sounds to me like it's moving forward, and whether or not Chelsea can get an answer for you as far as why they didn't go with your recommendation, I'll leave that up to her.
And we all know how fast government moves forward, so we can definitely voice the concerns. This committee can voice the concerns back to council.
And Dawn's point is very valid. We're not looking to redesign the infrastructure underneath where the roads go and the median that they're putting in there and the extra walkway, et cetera. We're looking at barrier type things to move pedestrians in the direction that moves them to a controlled traffic device versus random access. Okay, Bay Shelter, the Bay Street Shelter, the status, both, how much of that got funded and where are we on it?
Great news. So we finished the sidewalk project on School Street and Bay Road. Haven't seen it, swing by, it looks phenomenal. The pad was poured, the town poured the pad based on Lee-Tran specs for the shelter. And I did get confirmation from Lee-Tran that they will be installing and funding procurement of a shelter to be installed on Bay Road before their seasonal service starts on January 3rd. So my response to them was, let me know how I can help you with the permitting. They have to pull a permit, and they are going to be installing a shelter there and reconfiguring their route as this committee and council suggested.
And what's the shelter, what's it going to include as far as, you know, the signage and the communications? Is that part of it?
So there will be signage opportunity, and when I say signage, I mean trolley stop, tram information, not normal.
Very much like what's at Bowditch.
Yes, exactly. We did put the conduit in for future, if council or town or whomever decides to put in like the code blue, like we discussed, like at college campuses, you hit the code blue and it calls 911 or campus security, whatever. That has not been planned. I'm still working with FPL to get the pole installed on Bay Road to wrap up that project, but conduits there for future development if that's the path we choose to move forward with.
Where's that conduit run, Chelsea?
Stero to basically Oak Street. Pulls from, they ran the line from Sea Grape side where that loading zone is across, so it's right where the shelter is. We have blank conduit the entire length on both sides, on School and Bay.
So quick background for new members. When we put together a design for shelters, we looked at all sorts of digital advertising and that, and the cost was outrageous. And so we settled on as a way to do public announcements, very much like you see at Bowditch, where it's just I'll call it almost, what's that thing, about 8 inches wide or something like that. It says next trolley arriving at. But it would also allow us, I believe, to be able to get a warning message, you know, lightning in the area, storms coming, some kind of emergency type warning on there as well. But it wasn't the full digital advertising. But the other component in there that we looked at is being able to make these safe havens. And so we talked about putting in, I believe the term we used is code blue, was the device that we were looking at. Is that what it was? And Chelsea came up with the numbers, but it's adding to each of these shelters, and we came up with like 10 recommended places to put shelters of this size on the island, to put these code blue devices in, so that someone that has a medical emergency or someone that just feels unsafe can go there, as she describes very much like you see on a college campus. They would know that a shelter has access to emergency services immediately. And we also talked about putting in there the CPR devices that as another way to have emergency care at these shelters. So since that's not currently part of that, although it's been provided for, do we still want to recommend to the council that they go forward with acquiring a code blue device for that shelter to make it more of a prototype what we want on the whole island or not? Personally, I'd like to see them get it in as soon as the shelter's up. I'd like to see a contract to have the code blue put in.
I
Other
think
thoughts?
if we're gonna have like a test site, I think that's a great site. You have the school right there and you have the library. I think that there's a lot of, for, you know, with Bay Oaks being in that area too, might be a great spot for a test site.
Agree.
All right, so the recommendation is that Chelsea puts the numbers together, and then we'll recommend that to the council, that they add it to their budget and have it installed after the shelter goes up, as soon as the contract can be executed and installation done. So get the numbers kind of write up what we need, and we'll make that a formal recommendation to the council. You understand what we're talking about there, right, Dan? So when this comes up?
Following up, I believe at one of the council meetings, I believe it was Councilmember Veach asked if these were grounded as like lightning.
Yeah, he did.
I asked Letran, and they said no, that they're not grounded. So I emailed him back and asked if he could reach out to the manufacturer and find out how we ground these. And I have yet to hear back. So I will follow up with Letran on the grounding of the shelter. Just, John, I believe the signage in the shelter on Bay Road is a static sign, not digital. I will confirm.
I thought we had talked about putting what they had at Bowditch in there.
I think what they're putting in is something they had in inventory. So let me follow up and find out exactly which one that they're putting in.
Because I think we agreed that we didn't want to spend the carbon amount for true digital signage, but, and I don't remember who brought the Bowditch point up, but someone brought it up, that Bowditch had the ability to, and it was basic LED lights that put an extra arrival, but it also had the ability to put in a message, and that's what we wanted. So if they took it out of inventory, maybe we have to look at getting the digital that.
Or an upgrade, something. I'll find
Okay.
out. For your next. You're giving me lots of homework.
Basically,
It's been a while till you had the whole summer off.
grounding is just putting down ground rods,
I know. Well,
fairly simple.
I gotta find out from them and their manufacturer that they can do that, so. And it blew my mind as well.
I mean, we don't have that much lightning anyhow.
Unintended.
But every one of those shelters should be. There's got,
Again, sometimes the obvious we hear and we go, wow, doesn't make sense, but
doesn't make sense.
Learn something
stuff
new.
just accumulates.
Every one of them should be grounded.
The digital signage was important because it allowed us to do the emergency warnings, but it also offered opportunity to drive people to events. So as Bay Oaks, for example, and that builds out and we build more community entertainment and activities there, the ability to say tonight at Bay Oaks concert or something on there so people can see that's really what we want to do. And if we can't do that, there are other solutions around town that we can use, but that was the initial one. Next up, sidewalk markings. And this was the sidewalk, so a year ago, May, the previous council, we met with them, and it's sidewalk markings from to Lover's Lane, basically Red Coconut, where we have the shared bicycle pedestrian sidewalks. What we had talked about and the council had agreed to do was put in markings. One side would be a bicycle with an arrow pointing in the right direction, the other side would show someone walking. So that when you come down and you ring the little bell, people don't jump when you say right, they don't jump right into you. So it was to try and give some visual guide. That was one, and this is going to be the bike lanes themselves, but the first one, those markings, where do we stand on putting the sidewalk markings?
I can tell you there's been no progress made on staff's side. So that's a county interlocal between the county and the town that it would require.
What do we need to make the request or remind council that they voted to do that? I'll send you in our report a reminder that your previous council agreed to put these in and no action's been taken. So if it's budgetary, if it's priority, I don't know, but I know anybody who's been on the sidewalks recently that hasn't been hit by a golf cart or an electric bike or someone that says on your right and that's where they jump right in front of you. These things, I think, as hopefully the season picks up, these are relatively simple things to do.
Was there a commitment to have the town install that, or to work with Lee County to do an interlocal to have it installed?
It was agreement to get it done. I don't remember whether we said they had it, we made a recommendation, they did it, they agreed it was a great idea. They loved the idea, they had an arrow showing which way the bikes to go so people don't go the wrong way on the bikes. And it was, okay, go forward.
County sidewalk, so it'd require an interlocal.
Ask a question also. I see this same problem, and it just happened yesterday, from Times Square. I know it's the new road and the sidewalk, but the sidewalk is actually the street, or the bike lane is actually where the cars are. And some people stay on the sidewalk, some people are going into the street, so then you're getting cars slamming their brakes on, and then they're running into people as it's getting busier on the sidewalk, so in front of the park. And then at Salty Crab, I just saw it like 3 times yesterday too. Another guy was coming another way, and there's just nowhere for them to go, and everybody's, jumping off their bikes, and people jumped in the street, and cars slammed on their brake. I don't know if there's a solution there as well.
Hopefully that'll come up in our discovery with the sheriff and the residents, because one thing you'll notice, and I don't know how well it's complied, there is no bike riding inside of Times Square.
Right, and this is outside of it, right?
And where I was going is maybe when we get this feedback and we get the data, we move that down to Crescent. We move it down so that you must walk your bikes, great. If that turns out to be a real hotspot where there is either pedestrian accidents, cyclists, or vehicles, that may be something our report discovery shows that that's a hotspot, and we may look at the solution it has nothing to do with the sheriff or the fire. It may be we just extend down this no riding lane because of just the density that's in that particular.
Exactly, that's it, exactly it. Okay.
Good.
Since you're talking about it, the appropriate time to bring it up or not, but recently the town did an interlocal with the county as far as taking care of the vegetation along between the sidewalk and the curb. I don't know if it's appropriate to have public safety involved in some of those decisions as to try to prevent people from starting off on their bike or taking their strollers and walking off the curb. If there's some sort of vegetation that would work for public safety to try to keep that from happening.
That was part of our design.
I think we already gave recommendations on that, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I remember Mike was very emphatic about the height, and we talked about the width of it so that people couldn't push a baby stroller through. But Mike, I remember, was quite adamant that we had to be sure of the maintenance and the height so that the visibility wasn't lost on pedestrians and kids. So I know we had a lengthy discussion on that, and I believe it was in our report.
Okay.
Site triangle dictates a lot of that in our codes.
Sam?
The site triangle and our codes dictate a lot of the height and.
The other that was discussed at that May meeting a year ago was the bike lanes themselves. And I wish Tom was here because this was Tom's big issue. I don't know who's tried to ride their bike on Estero. That's a pretty narrow bike lane, and I'm sure it's compliant with state laws. But it's just one more white line that no one pays attention to. I often just flip over to the sidewalk because you just watch the cars that are distracted texting, and the next thing you know, they're right behind you in the white lane, and they suddenly look up and go, oh, there's a person in front of me. We talked about doing different color in there. We talked about putting blocks in. This goes to the demo that Dan brought up earlier. But We were told by the county, and the council said it wasn't worth the, we have to pick our battles, and that wasn't one we want to take, is that because of the sand here, that would erode very quickly if we tried to put like a green pathway or something to distinguish it. I don't see many people using the bike lane. I see most people using the sidewalk, and people I talk to, it's because they don't want to be out in the road with distracted drivers, and that it's not well marked. Dan brought up, we look back into the demo again, but I think at one time we also, even if we can't get the free demo like before, I think we should get that demonstration underway, so when they finish full length of Estero, that we have a more definitive marking of those bike lanes so that people are aware to stay out of that area. So if you can't get the demo going, you cost something out where we could, and we do it on the north end because we control it, but where we could start to look at investing in doing that.
Well, if the committee wants to pick a pattern or whatever it may be, we can make sure that meets FDOT guidelines and standards, and then we can pick a small section. I think we scoped out between Carlos Circle, both on the north end, both pieces, from Carlos to Carlos, and do a trial run with, my staff can.
So why don't you just, for the next meeting, tell us, give us 2 or 3 ideas and send them out, and we'll just vote on it next meeting. Something that's compliant. One of them would be solid block. I think we talked about like a 6-foot strip of solid and then a gap and a 6-foot. Another would be just striping in there that does it. Maybe it's just different.
How
color.
about someone from this committee choose 2 to 3 options, and I'll make sure whatever those are compliant. Have someone from the committee do the legwork, because what I may choose is not something that you.
How about reaching out to Tom? Ask Tom to give you some recommendations.
That.
I can tell you down in Naples, they use a green reflective, in certain spots, they have a green reflective tape that they put down. I don't know if it's a tape or a paint, but you can really see it at night.
I think Tom referenced that in his.
All right, so if you get a hold of Tom, have him come up with 3, send them out, and we'll vote on it next month, and then you cost it out. We'll do a demo on the south end. We'll put some time frame around the demo.
North end.
North end. And then hopefully we'll be able to come up with something that we can cost out for the full length of Estero. And I'm assuming that is also an interlocal or something that has to be taken in consideration. We seem to be taking a lot of the county's work on that road anyways and bringing it in-house, so what's one more?
Job security.
Next up, I have member items. We'll start with Heidi. You got anything?
I do not.
Jim?
Today.
On? Dan? Mike?
Just the lighting thing has me concerned. This major deal, especially expense-wise.
I have a couple. First off, and I missed part of the meeting yesterday when you were talking about Bay Oaks, but Dan, this came up before. 2 meetings ago, it was the parking. Did you guys talk about the parking at all at the council meeting yesterday? Bay Oaks design?
No.
Okay. So 2 meetings ago, I listened, and I forgot there was a large number of parking spots that were going to be built into Bay Oaks. It was expensive. And I believe it was Council Member Veach was looking to reduce them. And I thought the opportunity that was missed is promoting public transportation. As Heidi pointed out, we're going to have a brand new shelter literally 1 block from Bay Oaks. That has the tram and it has the trolley. So why wouldn't we cut the number of parking spots at Bay Oaks to encourage people to take public transportation to get there for events? Use that space for something more, more green space. There's also the option of making that paid parking, and those that are residents that have the $25 I think we pay for parking under the bridge and that, or if you're a member of Bay Oaks, you get a little sticker and you can park there. But those that don't would have to pay to park there, and they could generate a little revenue. But from a public safety perspective, here's a golden opportunity where we want to promote public transportation to get vehicles off the road, and yet we're building something to encourage private vehicles to drive to the north end of the island. To me, it was very incongruent. And so I just want to get your thoughts on making a recommendation that they cut the space to drive behavior that says use public transportation that's readily available in that spot versus encouraging people to bring their own vehicle because you're accommodating a wide parking lot. Thoughts, anybody?
Great idea.
I don't know if it's advantageous to necessarily cut down substantially on the parking available, because some people, maybe public transportation won't work for them. But I think encouraging the use of public transportation from Bay Oaks, the proximity of where we're putting the shelter, be really advantageous if it's done through signage or whatever. I think it would be very helpful to try to encourage the use of public transportation. I'm a little nervous about cutting back parking, but, and I know you're trying to drive behavior by doing that.
Chime in. Uses of this campus, our codes dictate how many parking spots are required. Of course, we could get a variation on those. We're actually, the consultant, myself, Allison, the Parks and Rec director, and our community development staff will be sitting down relatively shortly. You know, paperwork has to get signed, ink still drying on the contract. But to discuss the requirements for parking, what alternatives, I can tell you a bike rack that holds 4 bikes, and substitute one parking spot in our codes. So there are alternatives that we're looking at. Bike racks for everyone. But that is something in our peripherals moving forward. Like I said, we're only at 30% design with Bay Oaks, and these are questions that we are asking. Allison is a very, I am too, but Allison is a big environmentally sensitive person. She runs the Mound House. You can see her work there. So having her on board and having our consultants on board, we will come up with a solution that be comparable for both sides.
You have, those are my thoughts, those are Jim's thoughts. The other thing I had, we brought up last year the town investing in bells for bikes and making them available through town hall to the citizens. There, few people use bells on bikes as they're coming up on pedestrians. And I know when you do use it, people can hear it, and normally there's a reaction to it. And I don't remember who brought up the idea, but I thought it was a good one, that the town actually invest in bell and maybe light for bicycles, make them available to the residents for free, very much like we bought environmentally friendly bags with advertising on it, I guess, that were passed out for people to use at Publix and that, instead of the plastic and the paper bags. Is that still something we want to pursue with the council, to put aside some money to buy lights and bells for residents so that they would have those on their bicycles as they're going up and down the street? If it is, then we can look at trying to come up with some cost item or some costing for that, and then take that proposal to the council. So what are your thoughts?
I think it's a great idea. It's a lot like what the fire department does with make them available to the community. Don't force them, but they just make.
Thoughts?
I'm good with it. The trouble is they ring the bell right behind you. Have a letter come out in the state there, you know what I mean? Maybe, 20 yards away or something, ring the bell. so
Get
people
smart
know.
bells so that they can detect when you're coming up on somebody and ring it. All right, why don't I'll get together with you or maybe Randy, we can look into if there's any kind of procurement device out there that we can come up with some pricing for this kind of thing with. Must be something out there. So I'll meet with Chelsea, just see what kind of pricing for lights, certainly the rear light so that people can see them. Again, if they're gonna be using the bike lanes, having those lights that flash make a big difference than just the person on the bike riding along down there. So I'll get with Chelsea, we'll come up with some numbers and bring them back to the next meeting.
I honestly say that if you're a resident here, you have lights on your bike. There's very few, I feel, residents that don't have lights. It's the rental bikes that don't have lights.
We not regulate
that's-
rental bikes?
What?
Does the town not regulate rental bikes for safety?
No.
There's a golden opportunity.
I think that's more of a no lights on bike issue and no bells on bike issue than the local residents. That's the way I feel about that. I don't know.
I can,
Anybody else? I don't.
just some background, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Chelsea, but I think when we brought up about rental agreements and having them understand that we want to build into the bike rental agreements, that these are the safety rules on the island, we talked about, and Tom did a lot of the research. He met with every one of the rental companies and talked about them putting on lights and bells. And the town manager said, we don't want to get in the business of regulating the businesses on the island. And so all that was withdrawn. I have no problem with trying to resurrect that again. But at the time, it was, the town manager said, I don't want to get into the business of regulating and being in, I guess there was legal issues he was considering, and the council agreed with him and said no. We can bring that up again with Roger and see if there's any change on that. And I also think once we find out what the cost of the poles and lights are, maybe we can make an offer to the rental companies to do something with it, or maybe even pay for them that way as well. Let's come up with the cost,
If
but I
you're
do
gonna
know
give
we
them
brought
out,
it up.
give out the lights and bells free, I'm sure they're gonna come and get them.
Oh, exactly.
And again, depending on the cost, but at the time, we had talked about putting right into the rental agreement and requiring that, and the council said to back off on it, so that's what we did. There may be a change of hearts, new council, it may be something to look into, but that was the answer at the time.
You can have them on your bike, but it's the end user that has to actually turn them on or use it.
And then the batteries was an issue. What's his name? Used to talk about the
Leon.
batteries. Leon.
Leon, oh, wait.
Leon used to come in and say, then I gotta get batteries, you can supply me with batteries. It went down a rat hole in a hurry. But let's come up with a cost of that, maybe out of the cost, they're cheap enough that we can actually come up with some way to encourage them to do that.
I have a couple items if you're done with yours.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Chelsea.
I just wanted to kind of give you guys an update because you guys are public safety. The signal at Old San Carlos and Estero Boulevard is out on the street, and out on the street, it's out for bid. It is funded through LAP funding, local agency program, plan, one of the two. Too many acronyms.
What location?
Alphabet soup. Old San Carlos and 5th Street, Estero. Old San Carlos and Estero. That's funded through LAP. Those are out to bid right now. The town said that the whole reason the town got LAP certified was to do this project. We are project to project certified. For LAP is federal funding, for those that aren't aware, but we did get federal funding. We executed the contract with this FDOT to put that signal in, and for CEI, construction engineering section funds. The engineer made sure that the contractor is doing it as it's designed. And of course, the intent of that project, the hope would be to do it essentially this time next year in the off season, the month of September. And that's kind of what it's planned for right now, because
They removing the other one?
eventually down the road, it's all part of the bigger base of the bridge design. So the town's doing Old San Carlos, the county is doing Crescent. And of course, those would be interconnected. And then once the base of the bridge design happens, it'll all be flowing together. But I just wanted you all to be aware that that is out on the street. And then, just as a reminder, John, make sure that this time and date is good for everyone. So this meeting room can be packed at times with other meetings, and so if we do, just as a committee, decide to change date and time, I have to make sure that's kosher with the scheduling of.
And that's next up, is to actually book those out. Do you have an estimated time frame for that light to be put in at Old San Carlos, based on the bid?
Construction,
Installed, operational.
this end of next year. I don't know when the county, because the county, we have to do an interlocal with the county.
I was just curious if you had a ballpark. I know that it's going to change. I'm just curious as what it was.
Then the town will turn that over to the county, and the county will maintain it as part of their larger traffic signal system.
Any other public, anything you want to contribute? You sat there so patiently all day long and just listened to us ramble. Thanks. The last thing on the agenda was to set up the meetings.
Public comment.
There was public comment. There's only one public here.
We go through the agenda.
Is there any other public comment?
Hearing none. Thank you.
So the next up is the meetings. We've been a little loose on this, but as to when we met, and there was a lot of reason for that. There was scheduling and things, but traditionally, and the Public Safety Committee meets on the third Tuesday of each month. And in order to better inform the public and to allow us to work our schedules better, what I'd like to do is set up for the next 3 months, and the target dates would be, and it would be November 16th.
Is this meeting the same third Tuesday of each month? Okay.
It would be November, if I looked at my calendar properly, it's November 16th,
17th.
17th, and December 22nd.
15th. First is on a Tuesday. It's my birthday. I have to know it.
It's November 17th and December 15th.
And then January 19th. Right?
Yes.
1 out of 3. Those are the next meeting dates. The follow-up I have, just see if I missed anything. I'm going to do a write-up on the process for doing discovery and meeting with the sheriff and fire. We'll come up with, we'll ask the attorney and the clerk for the best way for us to engage with them with more than one member, because I do think it's important for more than one member to be there. And maybe we just hold
Work session.
work sessions where we go through and do these things. Lighting study, we'll be waiting on Chelsea to get back to us as to our involvement in the evaluation and then the actual interaction with the consultant, and you'll check the RFP, may already have that in there. Put into the crosswalks at the foot of the bridge, was there still an opportunity to discuss that? If not, what was the rationale for the numbers that are there versus what we had? Shelter, Code Blue cost, and we'll make a formal recommendation and ask for budget to have those contract issued and install the Code Blue at that Bay Street shelter. Looking into the grounding with Lee County, and then also into the signage, the interactive versus something they pulled out of the warehouse. The sidewalk, we'll make another recommendation or reminder to council about the markings on the sidewalk and the need for an interlocal, and I'll dig out the minutes of the joint meeting where they agreed to do that. Tom, you'll reach out to him for the ideas on the bike lanes. You already have the comment on public transportation. I'll get with you, and maybe it's you and Randy, and we'll see what kind of procurement there is for bells and lights, what the cost would be. Based on the cost, we'll bring it back to the group for an idea on what the distribution of that thing should be. Then you're gonna also check with Roger about how he wants to obtain the information from the sheriff and fire department, their monthly reports. And also, we'd like to see the contracts, you know, that actually talk about what services, as opposed to just the ordinance that allowed for that to happen. What'd I miss?
And then I'm gonna send the link to the new members for the bike ped master plan.
Anything else? Any other comments? Motion to adjourn? Okay, you guys want to stay? I'll move till we adjourn.
A second.
All right, and just for the new members, normally we try to end within an hour. We're usually pretty good at that, but this was getting reorganized and trying to catch up on months of what had been going on. But normally, we start at 9 and we finish 10:15, somewhere around in there. We try to keep it moving along. So welcome to the group, and look for emails.